In the first set of our PowerPoints, we're going to be talking about creating healthy programs and then maintaining healthy programs. Some of the topics we'll cover today: introduction to creating a healthy program, ways that we can keep children and their families healthy. When we're communicating with parents about health, how can we do that proactively, get the information to them in the beginning so that they understand what our program is about and how we are going to try to keep them healthy, and then reactively after children get sick, how do we then communicate that with the parents? Then we'll go over some licensing regulations. It's actually the core mission of licensing is to keep children safe and healthy. So most of their requirements and the regulations have to do with that. We'll go over some of the most pertinent ones, some of the deficiencies, and a little bit about the immunization law that's come through California state as well. Mandated reporter training would also be as part of keeping children healthy and safe, but we're actually going to cover that later in this semester. That reporter training was in flux as of up until a couple weeks ago when they released some of the information about they released the new training module. So before that, we knew that there was going to be new requirements in 2018, but we weren't sure what the new module was. So we have that information, so we're going to go over that at the end of the semester. There are some recent court cases that have come forward as well about child protective services and child welfare services and their ability to come on site and interview children. One of them actually just happened this week. So I am trying to get a little bit more information myself so I can pass on if that will be changing childcare or if it's just something to keep in the back of our mind. So we're not going to be covering that this week. Mandated reporter and child abuse will be in weeks to come. So in the book, Health, Safety, and Nutrition for the Young Child, Lynn Maritz talks about the state of wellness, which includes the teacher's role in creating environments that are supportive of learning, and part of that is creating healthy programs that maintain a healthy environment for children where illness and contagion are minimized as much as possible so that we can keep children healthy and safe. A lot of times when I'm working with children with special needs and I go into the home, they'll ask me, when is too sick? When should I call the office and not have you come out and provide therapy? And my kind of general is, the regular diarrhea, fever, and stuff like that. But then I also talk about just the idea of participation. If your child cannot participate in the therapy that I'm going to provide, I probably shouldn't come out. We should try to reschedule for a different day. If it just needs to be a day where they relax and recuperate, then that's kind of what I consider a non-participation day. So that's really what we're looking for, is that children can participate in our high quality curriculum that we have and a high quality program that we have so that they're healthy enough to engage in those curriculum ideas. California Early Childhood Educator Competencies video series. This one's on health, safety, and nutrition. We covered nutrition last week, so if you did want to watch more of this, it's about 15 minutes, the health and safety part, and it goes over a lot of the pertinent licensing regulations. If you were training staff, this would be a great thing to watch in whole because it gives you a good background, especially for new staff or staff that are new to childcare regulations, what the specific needs are in the classroom and how we can go ahead and keep children as safe and as healthy as possible. So I'm going to go over what the healthy program components are. So through staff and family training and then some very well-written policies about health that we then put into daily practice, we can achieve these healthier programs. So components of healthy programs would include hand washing, the time, space, ability, and materials. So children and staff are afforded enough materials to do a good job. Children are given ample time and assisted in kind of their self-help ability that allows them to do a partial job of washing their hands or a full job in washing their hands. So we give them enough time, space, ability, and materials to do this as well. And same with our staff. Our staff has paper towels, they have soap, they have enough time to do all of this, providing this for the children and providing it for themselves. So then disinfecting, cleaning, and sanitizing, once again, the time, ability, and materials. So staff is giving training in how to clean, sanitize, and disinfect, and enough time and materials throughout the day, not just at the beginning and at the end, but throughout the day, to minimize that illness and transmission. Part of it as well is knowing how to store materials. So then our health observations as well, we have daily health checks or observations, and then we exclude ill children. So training staff in how to provide a daily health check and an observation, and then when children do become ill, how we can remove them and isolate them from the classroom and notify their parents. And families as well, we need to tell them that we are doing these things. They need to know how we exclude ill children, how we isolate them once they are sick, what our daily health check and observations are, and then we need to actually put it into daily practice. So they see it on a daily basis, how we're keeping the classroom clean, how we're being proactive in keeping their child healthy, and then also when they do get sick, how we do that. Then keeping track of our medical authorizations, medical forms, accident reports, health records for all of our children. And then portfolios, assessments, and documentation might also identify children with delays who might need a possible referral to special needs resources. So when you're doing the DRDPs, if children are consistently rating really low and past and age appropriately or atypically are not hitting their milestones, then that might be an issue in which keeping children healthy might be referring them to alternative sources so that they can go ahead and get some help. And then one of the last things is family involvement in education. So families are educated in when to keep their children home, knowing what our policies are, and then maybe possible workshops in education on keeping children healthy and well fed and well rested and well exercised at home. So that past slide was information that all of you as well-seasoned teachers who are thinking about becoming directors or directors already or people who are wanting to step up into the director position know already. I've seen from the body of work that you guys have already turned in, you know about disinfecting, you know about hand washing and stuff like that. So now as people who are going to be in management or already are in management, how do we communicate with parents? So proactively and consistently, we're putting into practice our health policies. So they're given a policy information at enrollment and at orientation, and then they see it in practice every day. So they see us serving good food with gloves on, that kids aren't running around with green, snotty noses hanging down, that we're cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting the toilets. The windows are clean, that type of stuff. So when they see that put into practice, then they know that that's something that we're working for. And then also we need to attempt to be proactive, but also knowing that there's going to be reactive communication because we can't control illnesses and viruses. The stomach flu, the viruses, they come through a center and lots of people get sick. You know, half your classroom might be sent home sick. That type of things we can't communicate because sometimes the illness and the bacteria and the viruses could be breeding within the child for a long time before they show any symptoms. And in that case, a bunch of children are going to be sick, and we're going to have to be reactive in how we have parents come and pick up their sick children from our center. So policies and procedures for families would be a health policy that's explained in detail, signed to indicate understanding, and then put into daily practice by the school. So this could be a receipt for understanding, like the last page of a parent handbook that a parent signs, or it could be a standalone document or policy that the family signs as well. So this is going to detail our exclusion policy and our procedures. So keep me home if vomiting, diarrhea, green boogers, that type of stuff. And it's also going to detail how the program will keep the child clean by how we engage in healthy practices within the classroom, hand washing, cleaning, disinfecting, and isolating children. And then when a child is sick, how the parents are going to have to pick up. As soon as possible, they're coming to the center. The child is isolated from the other children in order to stop the spread of illness. And then a last thing might be possible family trainings or workshops on staying healthy. So built in your program, if you have built-in parent education or monthly nights where parents come in, you can think about the YMCA wellness program, having them come out and do a workshop for your families. My daughter's elementary school had CVS come out and they did discounted flu shots at the open house. It's convenient for families if they're already attending it, and then it reinforces that the program that you're running emphasizes health. Especially now we're back to school, lots of people are getting sick. So reminding our families about healthy practices that they can do at home shows them that our program takes health seriously. So when we're proactively communicating, so we have a clear policy for exclusion, and that's adhered to. So parents know that if their child had a fever, how many hours need to elapse before the child can come back into childcare. So they need to be home for 24 hours fever-free before they can go back to school. So I didn't do this once. I wasn't supported by my management. The dad told me on entering in the classroom, and my assistant director was there, that he had thrown up last night, but he hadn't thrown up again. And so it had been about 10 hours at that point. And he thought that he was fine, but he just wanted to check with me if the child could come into the classroom. And my gut reaction is no. But I look at my assistant director, and she shrugs her shoulders and lobs it to me. And the dad said, oh, I have a really important meeting. I'll stay home if I have to, but I'd really, really like to go because it's important for my job. So at that point, as a young and experienced teacher, I felt that I needed to kind of do this. My director wasn't backing up our exclusion policy, and I want to maintain a good relationship with my family. And I feel bad for him that he might have to stay out this day and miss an important meeting. So we allow the little boy to stay in the classroom. And about half an hour later, he starts vomiting. And at that point, we cannot get a hold of the family. Dad's in his important meeting, I'm guessing. This was in Los Angeles, so the mom is like across town in Santa Monica, and it's going to take her 2 hours to get back. So in the 3 or 4 hours that he was left in the school, he was then not isolated. So he was in my classroom because my management team said they didn't have space to take him out of the classroom. And by the end of the day, I think I had 5 or 6 kids vomiting. 2 of them were staff members, so my fellow teachers' children who were then going to be out the next day. And by the time I got home, I was throwing up. And I spent that next couple days just doing that. So I didn't exclude one time when I should have. And I definitely paid the price. And part of it was that I was not supported by my management team. And I think that's why I've always taken this really seriously when I am training staff, is that this is one of the basic things that we provide for our families is a healthy environment as much as we can. So a really clear policy for when children can and cannot be at school is going to be really important. And part of that is a daily health check. And it's typically fast, but it should be apparent to families that you're looking at their child and checking to see if they are actually healthy enough to be at school. And then if they are not, then exclusion after the health check if necessary. So this is when you explain to the family that the importance of the entire class being healthy. And if the child has green boogers and is sneezing and just wants to lay down, then school is not an appropriate environment for them. So the most important thing is that you have a clear policy that communicates how you are prioritizing health in your own program. So toy surfaces are clean, children are excluded when they're sick, toys that are mouthed are then taken away and cleaned and sanitized. So we're taking our clear policies and we're putting them into practice. It really goes a long way for parents to see when they see that like nap sheets are washed, caregivers are putting away toys in a bucket after babies play with it. Toilets are being sanitized, windows don't have boogers on them. Those types of things go a really long way for the parents to see how you prioritize health and wellness. And then hopefully that will allow them to understand that we've done our best. We have tried as much as possible to keep this environment healthy, but your child is sick because we are humans and humans get sick. And now this child needs to leave the classroom, go get healthy, and then come back. So sometimes the child is sick and they need to go home. Per licensing regulations, they need to be isolated and there needs to be a spot. And it doesn't need to be a sick room. Some programs are really nice. I had one program, we had a little side office where a printer and a sink and our medication was, and a refrigerator for refrigerated medications and stuff like that. And then we had a little cot with like special sick toys and stuff like that. And it was easily seen from the assistant director's office. They were right next to each other. And it was like the perfect situation, but not everybody has that type of stuff. But we just need to, as much as possible, if the child is vomiting, like I said a couple slides ago, we need to minimize his contact with the rest of the school in order to minimize that contagion getting around. Sometimes they're so contagiously sick that the whole program must be informed, like we need to write letters or we need to tell the parents about lice, whooping cough, measles or mumps. And in some of those cases as well, licensee needs to be notified as well. So not for lice, but for measles, mumps, and rubella. Those are the types of things that licensee needs to know, because those are considered epidemics and things that they are going to need to be able to track. So you need to also expect like a visceral reaction from the families, because when they're getting called, they're anticipating that sickness and the rest of their day. Taking off sick time is inconvenient, and for some families it has larger consequences. So for some people, leaving work is not a big deal. They can come and they can pick up their child and they can go home, sit on the couch and watch some TV. For single moms or people with precarious job situations, this could be an extra day can really hurt them. Since we only get 24 hours of sick leave a year, most children are going to suck up twice or 3 times that. And if they've run through the leave that they've had, they might be in a precarious work situation. That doesn't mean that you need to make special considerations. If a child's sick, they're sick, they need to leave your program. You're thinking of the program as a whole. You're thinking of all of the children in your care. So a child does need to go home, but understand that there might be significant situations for this family, and that they might be upset about it, and you just need to clearly communicate. There is a need for mildly ill care within our communities. Not everybody has family who can help out. Military families might be far away from home, and taking off time as active duty could be difficult, or you're a single mom, things like that. I did a quick Google search, and it doesn't seem to be any mildly ill care within our community, within San Diego County. If you know of any, please tell me. But it seems like a potentially economically viable program. You probably can charge a lot of money for having sick kids in a mildly ill care facility. So I don't know. I think that would be an interesting thing to learn about more. And if you guys know of any centers, please let me know. So I've talked the last couple slides a lot about policy, exclusion policies, health policies, what we do to keep the center healthy. So what your online assignment is it's a 2-parter. Again, this is going to be used for our parent manual that we'll be writing together as a group, or we'll be writing in class and on our online assignments in a couple weeks. So by writing this is going to get you towards your parent manual. So you are going to imagine you're giving a brand new parent a tour or orientation. So you need to explain as clearly and simply and as concisely to the parents what your health and safety policy is. So how you're going to describe to the parents how your staff and how your program keep the classroom clean and healthy for children by sanitizing, washing toys, hand washing, that type of thing. And then you're also going to say when and why they should keep their children home from childcare. So we prioritize health and safety, and we take it very seriously, and we do a lot of things in the classroom to keep your child healthy, but sometimes your child is going to be sick. And these types of situations are when they should be home. So telling them fever, diarrhea, vomiting, and then cold and sickness. What are the reasons why a child should be excluded from home care? From child care and stay at home. So that's what our online assignment is going to be, but it's going to be as clearly and as concisely. It doesn't need to be a really long policy. It just needs to very efficiently state why children need to stay home, and then how your program is going to try to keep them healthy when they are at school. All right, so we have written all these policies, and now we need to add it to our general paperwork and record keeping that we keep on site. So for employees, they need to have some kind of medical clearance or physical that they're physically able to work and they're healthy enough to work. And then they also need to have a TB test and a first aid and CPR certification. And then there should be a clear sick policy for your staff as well. So when should they stay home, and when should they take care of themselves, and when should they stay home and take care of their own children who might be sick? Knowing that and knowing the call out procedures, we talked about this a lot in our plan of action. That's what a lot of you chose because people had been calling out too much. So having a clear policy about how many times they can be out and how they should notify a program is really important. And then your signed health policies and procedures. So the things that you've written for the staff so that they know how to disinfect and where to store materials and things like that. And then throughout the day, you can do spot evaluations or observations. So when you're checking in daily on your staff and seeing how their day is and any concerns and stuff like that, you're also making sure that they're keeping the room clean and healthy. And then it's also probably going to be part of your regular observations or your ECHRS observations as well. That would be a component of an observation that you would do formally on a staff, is the ability to keep a classroom healthy as well. And then the paperwork and record keeping for children and families. So in a child's file, the exclusion policy and health policy signed by the parents. So a copy of it or a signed receipt from the handbook saying that they understand when they need to keep their children out of school. Then a medical clearance within 30 days of enrollment. Our immunizations, the blue cards that we do to make sure that children are adequately have their shots when they come into school. And then a log of accidents and incidents. Accident reports, typically you make a copy and you keep it in as well. And then any kind of documentation of children's milestones. I brought this up earlier, and then I'll have a slide at the very end about possible needs for a referral. So as you are doing your DRDPs or your assessment or any kind of documentation and portfolios that you do in the classroom, if they are starting to indicate that there are global delays or significant delays in one area like language or gross motor, that's another way that we can keep children healthy, is by bringing that attention to the attention of the parents, and possibly referring to assessment services so children can get additional therapies. So the core mission of community care licensing within the California Department of Social Services is to keep children healthy and safe. So while they're in childcare and they're out of the care of their families, how are we working to provide healthy and safety standards for them? So we're going to go over some pertinent regulations and trainings that are mandated by licensing. And then I've also linked to their main page, which has all of their brochures and their forms by alphabetical order. So if you were looking for like a nebulizer consent form, then you just go to N and find the nebulizer consent. You could print it out and the parent could sign it. Because it's really important that you're visiting the CDSS, so the California Department of Social Services website, which goes over community care licensing, especially if you're a first-time director or you're changing positions. It's important that you know all the regulations to the best of your ability, and you can implement them within your classroom, and then you have all the forms that you need that have been signed by the families. Getting to know the regulations is going to be really important for you, and getting to know your own personal analyst as well. That's a good place if you have a specific question and you can't find the information on the website, giving her a quick call so you're being proactive once again and knowing what the regulations are and asking any questions. Because it can be difficult, the website, I think, with their new videos and how they try to organize and send out the information for people, I think is getting better and better every year, but it's still a lot of regulations and it can be a little bit confusing as well. So they try to do a good job, but talking to your analyst, who's a real life person who works in this field, she'll be able to answer your questions. And it shows that you're working, if you do it in a professional way, it shows that you're working towards compliance, which they'll appreciate. So if you're first getting your license, you have things that you need to do: first aid, CPR, and then preventative health and safety. And then childcare providers are going to renew training by completing 4 hours of first aid and CPR again. And if they're doing it less than these hours, then the training is not in compliance, and they have very specific regulations for those providers of CPR. They have stickers and sign in and out sheets and things like that. So you need to make sure that when you're doing that preventative health or first aid or CPR, that you're going to an actual certified training program. I've heard horror stories of people contracting to have somebody come out and provide it on a weekend. And the guy says, oh, I can do it for half the time and it's no problem. And then they're out of compliance on that. I heard about that a couple years ago. So licensing has worked to make sure that people are being provided the accurate training that they need. If you go on their website, they actually talk about the most common deficiencies that people end up having, and all of them are health and safety wise. So for health ones, that the child care centers need to be clean, safe, and sanitary. So if an analyst comes in and they notice that it's not sanitary, the toilets haven't been disinfected, or the bleach is just sitting out unlabeled, something like that, then that would be an issue. And then maintaining immunizations. That's like the third one. I think that's like 7% of deficiencies, something like that. So it was actually a big one, is that people aren't getting those shot cards from the parents, or they're not getting them regularly, and they're not doing the blue cards. It's a lot. It's probably an afternoon or a day of paperwork for you to make sure that you have all of this. But shots and shot records are really important to keeping our children healthy. And it's now kind of a law that we provide this within our daycare centers. So I can't go over every single health and regulation, but we'll go over by talking about hand washing and sanitizing and disinfecting, and health policies. We touch on most of them. There are a few that I want to just bring up, that a director needs to complete 15 hours of health and safety training, that there's a daily health check, that children with obvious symptoms of illness are not accepted, and that once they are sick, that we isolate them, and they have the ability to isolate and care for any child who becomes ill during the day. And then we notify them immediately, and they have to pick up their child as soon as possible. So those are some of the big health and safety regulations that affect licensing. So within California state law, so to enter a child care center, children must have received their immunizations as required by California state law. So they need to submit their yellow card or a printout from the doctor that is proof that they have gotten their shots. Copy the date of each vaccine onto the California school immunization record, and then keep that on file for each child. And then it's updated and submitted to the state every 6 months. So that's what when I was doing a program of 20, it was a very small infant and toddler program. That was an afternoon. For your larger programs, every 6 months, budgeting into your time management that a day, 2 days, 3 days, depending on the size of your program, you're going to be updating and submitting that each child has received their immunizations. So if a parent chooses not to immunize their children, so what they need to do is they need to submit a licensed physician's written statement of their medical exemption for missing those shots, and then the record with the dates of all required shots that are not exempted. So what this is kind of saying is that is the physician, the doctor, the person with a medical license, telling the families that there are certain shots that they can have and certain shots that they cannot have. There is also a personal exemption form, which can also be signed by the physician, that the child is under the care of as well. So this isn't somebody that they've found who will be willing to do this. This is the physician that the child is under the care of, typically a pediatrician. So that's kind of the law, and I linked to where this is so that you can get some more information about it. But I've also linked to the measles cases and outbreaks, which was in California in 2015. Starting with Disneyland, we had a bunch of measles cases. And this was a big deal for me because at the time I had a child who was immune compromised because of his special need, and he had just started receiving his immunizations at 2 years old. So before that, he was not allowed to, per his doctor, because of the specific special need that he had. They decided to go to Disneyland in December, and they were part of that group that was possibly exposed to measles. So they then had to go to a doctor and a specialist in order to meet with the doctor so that they could cover that he wasn't at an especially big risk because of the fact that he was immune compromised. This is the first time they had ever kind of done anything like this in the 2 years since they had had their child go to Disneyland. It was kind of a big risk. It was something that they had actually discussed with their doctor. And nobody really thought that somebody with measles would be walking around the center or around Disneyland that day. And I think 4 or 5, I don't remember how many people, but people were exposed that day and ended up getting it. It's highly contagious, spit droplets, anything like that, coughing, and it can be spread. And that's why we have immunizations against it. So there are consequences because as less people immunize, then less herd immunity goes down. And so children who are immune compromised, like this little boy who should be protected by the herd, are not. So it is important. I know this is a hot topic for some people. Some people believe very strongly against immunizations. And that's why California has this law about physician's written statement and personal exemptions and things like that. I do think it's prudent if your facility does accept unvaccinated children. So to my knowledge, you can choose not to provide care for children who are immunized. So if you do, what is your exclusion policy that signals what your program is going to do in the case of an outbreak or an exposure? So for example, South Bay has really been hit by whooping cough each year, and I was exposed in 2013, working down in El Cajon and then in Chula Vista by 2 families that had whooping cough. And my children were very young at the time as well. So then public health nurses were notified. I was notified. I had to go to the doctor. All of the staff that I work with and my coworkers had to go. The families, their older children, all of their school. So there's a big chain of command, and there's a lot of paperwork that happens when people get these very highly contagious illnesses like this. And then even in my own daughter's school, each year that they've gone to their elementary school, we've gotten, last year I want to say it was 3 written letters home talking about a whooping cough case within the classrooms so that they know what it is. So what is your facility going to do and what is the exclusion policy if you have unvaccinated children in your program and something like whooping cough or measles comes through? How are you going to tell all of the families, and then how are you also going to tell the families that are unvaccinated? Because they are at higher risk. I think it's 3 times more for getting whooping cough if they're unvaccinated. Hepatitis A is also an emerging crisis. You've probably heard about it on the news. The death rate has been going up, and our homeless population has been very hard hit, both in North County, San Diego, primarily within Oceanside, and then also in downtown San Diego by people who have gotten hepatitis A and then people who have died from it. This is only really going to affect homeless populations or people that are considered high risk by the county who work directly with people who are homeless. Hepatitis A is very, very contagious. It's primarily spread fecal oral matter and then also by oral motor as well. So like you're coughing and the droplets coming out of your mouth. So it's really, and food as well. So it's really, really highly contagious. So some people might qualify for the vaccine, you as a staff person, if you work with high-risk populations. So you can always call the county. And even here at Palomar, we have a vaccination clinic right now for people who are deemed high risk because they work with the homeless population. So we've talked a lot about immunizations and when you should immunize, when you should check if the children have had their immunizations, and then what are kind of your policy as far as notifying parents when things like whooping cough and measles come through your center. So children with special needs have different accommodations that they might need within the health realm. So sometimes I like to consider it with there's health special needs and then there's delays. So a child with a peanut allergy is going to require very careful and specific meal planning and storage and where they sit. And then you're also going to need to do training on EpiPen administration and then actually store the EpiPen for use. So those are issues that you're going to have to be very careful about if you have a child that has a severe allergy within your program. And then also there are health issues such as epilepsy, where there can have complex medical needs that need to be managed by the program in close collaboration with the family and possibly the doctor. So sometimes medications need to be taken various times of day. The child might be sleepy or very awake depending on how the dosage is, and this also goes for thyroid, things like that. So there are medical needs that are quite complex that with the parent and by order of the doctor you're going to be managing on site, and that's going to require a lot of training for staff on proper medication dosage, where it's stored, when it's administered, stuff like that. And then there are delays and special needs that require additional medical documentation and storage. And also there are going to be their behavioral issues as well. So a child with ADHD has a special need, which will cause us to provide accommodations within the classroom as far as behavioral needs, maybe with planning, with amount of time spent outside, positive reinforcement. And then there also might be medicine issues as well. Maybe if it's a school age program, as soon as the child gets in, they're taking their Ritalin in order to refocus themselves after school. Or maybe they don't take Ritalin, they only take Ritalin so that they can be in school. So that's just an example of a special need that requires accommodation by us behaviorally within the classroom, and then medicine storage as well in addition to that. So the best thing to do is to have some kind of tracking system for the child, the room that the child's in, the teachers that are responsible, the medications that the child needs, and then the trainings of teachers and their assessed understanding of the child's health needs. So for example, for a child with epilepsy, this is why I started this. I had a child with severe grand mal and petit mal seizures in our center. And she was a toddler, so she would fall down and have, the classic seizing ones where her whole body would jerk, and then she also had the absent seizures where she would just kind of fade out for a while and you couldn't get her back. And she was quite young. She was 1.5 at her first, and then she left the program when she was 3.5. So we went through 2 years of this with her. So we needed to make sure that everybody who came in contact with her was aware of the fact that she had epilepsy. If she fell to the ground, they needed to know what would happen. It was an automatic 911 call. For the absent seizures, the petit mal, we always notified the parents, and we would have them come and they would check her out afterwards and make the determination themselves if she needed to go to the doctor, the neurologist, be assessed, or if she could continue. So we needed to track every time that she had a seizure so that we could provide that information to the parents, and then if she needed to go to the emergency room, how long her seizures were, did she fall to the ground, did she hit herself, and then on top of that I needed to make sure that my staff was really well trained. They were all CPR and first aid, but just generally we found some webinars about epilepsy so that we could arm ourselves with more information about what it looked like and how we could keep her safe within the classroom. So all of a sudden we had this child with really complex medical needs. So I needed to train the staff, but I also wanted to make sure that anybody who went into the room was also trained, so floats and subs as well. So what we ended up doing was coming up with a system, which for me was an Excel spreadsheet of the child, the room, the teachers, the medications, or any kind of special accommodation that we needed, and then the trainings as well. So then this was kept in the front with the management team so that we were all aware of it. And then our admin assistants were aware of it too. And then any new staff that came in, if they were going to be a sub or they were going to be in that classroom or just typically a part of their onboarding, was to go through all of the children in the program so they knew what their needs were. It was also part of the classroom, so we would take the pertinent information. So if they had a child with a severe allergy, then they would have that information as well. So that if a sub or a float came into the room, they would be able to see that, James is allergic to peanuts and he needs to sit at a specific table, and his EpiPen is in the office, it's in a locked box, that type of thing. So it's a really good idea to somehow track or keep track of the children in your room, and then any kind of special needs that they might have when it comes to health and medication. So in conclusion, we're creating programs that address the health needs of the children in your care, and we're supporting families through the creation of well-written health policies that support a healthy program. So we are making sure that we are reducing our risk of spreading illness. We're supporting parents in their quest to have healthy families, and we're making sure that we're providing for complex medical needs that might be in part of our program. In the next PowerPoints, we're going to talk about creating and maintaining a safe program.